Hi. Well,
I was sure. I was so sure. I would have guaranteed. I was willing to bet money on it. I was positive.
and who's laughing now?
If you remember, last year I went through a bit of a phase and took a look at the Pac-Man World Trilogy. And at the end of that little retrospective, I said something along the lines of,
Pac-Man World is a dead series that will never ever come back, and if you think otherwise, you're stupid.
let's go back to June 28th, 2022, a far simpler time, a time when that sentence didn't make me look like a dumb, stupid idiot. I was going about my morning like any other day, just sort of doing normal morning stuff, when I randomly noticed Nintendo uploaded a Nintendo Direct Mini Partner Showcase. I was kind of actively ignoring gaming news at the time, so I kind of just stumbled upon this by accident. Since I had nothing better to do, I decided to give it a watch, because honestly, what's even going to be revealed in there?
A remake of Pac-Man World is coming soon.
And just like that, I lost all my credibility.
A remake of Pac-Man World. This is something fans of the series have been begging for, pretty much since the invention of begging for things. It had been so long, and Bandai Namco was desperately trying to avoid acknowledging this series even existed, that I really thought we'd never see it return, and it would continue to fade into obscurity. And look at where that got us.
But don't get me wrong, I was still beyond excited by this announcement, which was kind of a refreshing feeling for me. I mean, the last time I got this excited over the announcement of a game was 4 months earlier. Okay, whatever. I don't know, for some reason it felt like it had been a while since I had something to look forward to. And this absolutely was something to look forward to. It's always nice to see series that were long thought to be dead make a comeback. Hell, in July, we also saw the return of Klonoa, another somewhat forgotten Namco platformer with the Klonoa Fantasy Reverie series.
As shameless or pandering as it may be, it just feels good when a series gets attention when it hasn't gotten any in years. It's a warm feeling, like, no, your parents didn't forget about you. Anyways, now that the game's out, it's finally time to see if they were actually able to make Pac-Man World a good game.
I actually took this remake as an opportunity to revisit the original game so I could compare both versions with a fresh perspective. And comparison number one, this logo is ass!
Sorry, I've been waiting 2 months to say that.
What the hell happened here? I hated this logo the minute I saw it, and frankly, not enough people have been complaining about it. I'm getting sick of showing up to rallies alone. It looks so unfinished, like someone threw this together in 5 minutes and that's what they decided to go with. It looks like someone took a quick glance at the original logo and went, yeah, I get it. You do not get it! The original logo and the other two games' logos beyond that are bold, they're confident, they've got nothing to hide. The font is shiny like it's made of pure gold, and sure, it's a little harsh on the eyes, but that's why they kind of softened it up for 2 and 3. This is the exact opposite. The text is so flat and tiny, it doesn't even look like it's for a video game. It looks like an off-brand bag of potato chips. How do you make uppercase letters look lowercase? Re-Pac should not be the same size as Pac-Man World, okay? The fact that this is a remake does not hold the same significance as the actual title of the game. It shouldn't even be on the circle. It should be Pac-Man World, Re-Pac.
And while I'm at it, what kind of name is Re-Pac anyways? Like, what, they just had to force Pac somewhere into the title? Well, guess what? I got news for you. It's literally the first syllable!
And it doesn't even make any sense! Like, even if you wanted to look at it like a play on words, like Re-Pac as in package, then what? No! This isn't the original game being repackaged. It's not the 1999 game being resold as is. It's a remake! It's a full-on remake, so just call it that! I cannot express how much all of this hurts my feelings.
And then there's the box art.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of this. You had an opportunity to modernize the original game's box art. I love seeing that happen with remakes. And you know what? Sure, I can kinda see it. You've still got Pac-Man running with the ghost in the background, but the remake just feels lacking. The original game, Pac-Man was up front and center, coming right at you, but in the remake, he's a little more off to the side, and it looks more like he's just going for a nice stroll on the beach, rather than going on some grand adventure like he did in the original game.
Didn't I say we were actually gonna play this game?
Alright, that's enough of me bitching. Let's actually get into this. Yes, elephant in the room. Pac-Man's family looks like this now, and Miss Pac-Man, Baby Pac-Man, and Junior Pac-Man are now Pac-Mom, Pac-Sis, and Pac-Boy respectively. And this is thanks to the whole legal dispute over who has rights to said characters, which is a completely different issue that I don't feel like getting into. But it's also not something I'm going to or really can get mad about because it's not the game or anyone who worked on the game's fault.
Okay, now let's actually get into the game for real this time.
Just like the original game, we're shown the opening cutscene of Pac-Man's family getting kidnapped and
We better get into the actual gameplay soon because if I complain any longer, I'm gonna develop brachydactyly.
look, this cutscene just has none of the wacky, cartoonish charm the original game had. There, every family member's kidnapping had something to do with the area you rescue them in. Puka got an anchor dropped on his head, Junior Pac-Man got shoved into a tiny robot the size of a thumbtack, Professor Pac-Man got f***ing abducted. It was completely absurd and over the top, and that's what made it funny. The remake doesn't really have anything that creative, and overall just feels lower energy. Again, this kinda just feels like someone watched the opening of the original once and then tried to recreate it without understanding what made it work so well. Also, there's no voice acting anymore. Instead, the characters kind of just vomit gibberish at each other.
I have a blood pressure tracker now.
Oh, come on! The voice acting added so much life to these characters. Toc-Man's reign at the beginning of the game was so memorable and delivered so well, it gave him such a strong personality. You can't just replace that with and expect it to have the same effects. Actually, weirdly enough, the audio from the original cutscene works surprisingly well over the remix cutscene. Look at this.
No, you idiots! I wanted gold streamers and red balloons! The DJ stinks, the banners are crooked, and the cake should be chocolate! You're gonna ruin my party!
Boss!
What do you want?
Pac-Man's here on Ghost Island! The Pac-Man! I mean that pathetic fool trying badly, I might add, to impersonate you, who is clearly the real Pac-Man.
I thought you had captured Pac-Man!
We did see. Oops. A slight error on our part. Believe me, it won't happen again.
You idiots! My plans are already in motion! Pac-Man cannot be allowed to crash my party! Find him and destroy him!
Honestly, they should have just done a shot-for-shot recreation of these cutscenes and just kept the original audio and it would have been fine. But speaking of Toc-Man, it looks like someone went through a pretty major redesign and I actually kinda love it.
Holy sh**, finally.
I don't know if this is an unpopular opinion or anything, but for me, I think the best part of Toc-Man's character is that he's trying to impersonate Pac-Man while looking about as far away from Pac-Man as you can get, so leaning harder into that really works in my opinion. Now he looks like a machine built for war. He's got spikes everywhere, bigger, sharper teeth, arm cannons, a fucking jetpack. Like, he's just trying to throw a party. None of this is necessary. And that's why I love it. I do still think the old design was better, but this is also pretty damn good.
I have not used this for anything other than selecting a single menu option.
Okay, let's actually get into this, but for real. Ignoring the logo and box art and cutscenes and everything else I haven't complained about yet, how's the actual game? It's Pac-Man World.
No f***ing way!
It's actually impressive how faithful Re-Pac manages to stay to the original game. The level design is on point. It truly feels like you're playing the original game with modern graphics, which, man, this game actually looks really nice. Every location feels like a perfect modern evolution of their original looks. There's so much more detail on everything, and it looks great. The controls have also been improved quite a bit. Pac-Man always felt a little slow and clunky in the original game to me, but in the remake it feels like he runs faster, jumps higher, and overall just feels more precise. Which probably has something to do with the fact that there's no analog controls. Pac-Man now has full 360-degree movement, which is nice, but also kind of unnecessary. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, I'm just saying these levels weren't really designed to need that kind of precise movement. I honestly kept switching between using the D-pad and stick throughout my entire playthrough, because while playing with the control stick was nice, I was just more used to playing Pac-Man World with the D-pad, and never really needed anything more than that. Again, this isn't a knock on the game, I'm not saying I'd rather there not be analog controls, it's more just an observation. The point is, the game still controls pretty well.
And then you go to butt bounce, and never mind, I take back every nice thing I said about the controls.
There is a disgusting amount of delay between pressing the button to butt bounce and Pac-Man actually doing the butt bounce, and it just feels so unbelievably gross. Never before in this series was there a delay for the butt bounce. It's what made the move so satisfying in the first place. And the worst part is, the delay goes away after you do enough butt bounces in a row. Like, why the hell is it like this? The only other gripe I have with the controls has to do with swimming. In the original game, swimming was already pretty slow and tedious, but in the remake, they somehow found a way to make it worse. Pac-Man can no longer swim down. He can swim upwards just fine, but he can no longer swim down. You just have to let him sink. This makes precise swimming basically impossible and makes swimming in general incredibly boring. And this was their chance to fix it! They could have finally made swimming forward and down the same speed as swimming up, because in the original game, swimming up was faster than any other direction for some reason, but they could have changed that here! And they didn't! And I hate it! On a more positive note, they did make the Pac-Dot throw slightly more useful. Instead of chucking one at a 2-degree angle directly in front of him, Pac-Man throws Pac-Dots in a little arc, making the move a little easier and more fun to use. Also, Pac-Man has a Yoshi-style flutter kick now. I have no idea why they added this. It's apparently meant to be used as like a last chance move if you miss a jump, which is fine, but I mean, I barely ever use this thing aside from the couple times where I would just go, oh yeah, this move exists. It's not a bad addition, but it is a pretty superfluous one.
So yeah, the controls were refined in a remake, who'da thunk? Outside of swimming and butt bouncing, I'd say the game controls a lot easier and smoother, and as annoying as the butt bounce is, it's not impossible to get used to, although I would still prefer it if it worked normally. But of course, we cannot forget about the greatest addition of them all, the new Easy Mode. It's the exact same thing, except the flutter kick lasts for like 5 seconds longer. This game would truly be lost without that.
Alright, what else? We've got a lot going on in terms of little quality of life changes, like now the game tells you the main collectibles that are in each level before you play them, so you know where to get, or if you miss any letters, mazes, keys, friends, the things that are actually important. Although I still think a checklist of all fruit and Pac-Dots in a level, like in Pac-Man World 2, would have been kinda nice as a little 100% completion goal or something. The Ghost Island hub world is set up in a much more convenient way now. Instead of being a straight line that was a chore to run through, the levels are now organized into small sections that branch off a main path. You get access to the same levels in the same way as the original, just now you run up to the next section instead of running all the way to the right. Plus there are these warp paths that take you to any area, which makes things even more convenient. The Krome power pellets now respawn after wearing off, which means you're no longer at risk of missing any collectibles if you take too long and miss any areas you need a Krome power pellet for. There's also these new Krome enemies that can only be defeated with a Krome power pellet. That's not really a quality of life change, it's just kinda here. The slot machine at the end of each level is now spun by the new collectible tokens throughout each level as opposed to just using the fruit you collected. I'd say this is a quality of life change because in some of the later levels, pretty much the only fruit you collect would be to open a door, so if you were trying to go for everything but missed the bonus stage, you would end up finishing with no fruit and no slot spins. Now in the remake, all of your fruit will still go towards your high score, which increasing will still net you extra lives, plus you get a decent amount of slot spins for even more lives. The fewer amount of tokens means you'll have less spins too, which leaves the slot machine feeling a little more balanced since you won't be overflowing with extra lives. Holy shit, never mind. The only kind of annoying thing is that the game does now force you to play it, where in the original you could skip it. I didn't really have a problem with this, as I was happy to continue to make the life counter progressively more and more useless. But some people aren't into that, which makes not being able to skip the slot machine kinda dumb. Although I suppose you could just not collect the tokens. Although that does feel like a workaround to a problem that shouldn't really exist in the first place. Although really there shouldn't be any reason you wouldn't want more lives. Although sometimes you just want to get on with the game. Although,
was I going somewhere with this?
The other nice little change is that now the bonus stages have all been made a little easier and thus a little more fun. In the original game, it was a little too easy to go into a bonus stage, have no idea what to do, and then fail almost immediately. In the remake, they've been updated to make it a lot harder for that to happen, which some people may scoff at and say, oh, being able to fail the bonus stage is easier made it more of a reward for learning them. And to that I say, I am not going to replay any of these levels to master the bonus stages unless I'm replaying the entire game or I miss something important. I like that I can just get my extra shit and move on. And the one other little quality of life change is that now the bonus stages start as soon as you finish a level, instead of having to go to the slot machine, see all the letters, go to the bonus stage, then go back to the slot machine. Now you just finish the level, do the bonus stage, then go to the slot machine.
It's been probably 5 minutes since I bitched about something. We should probably change that.
Okay, look, I very much enjoyed Pac-Man World Re-Pac. I think there's a lot of improvements over the original game. But there's just a couple little things that rub me the wrong way. There are some other very minor complaints I have with the controls, one being that the incredibly convenient and satisfying Reveral Pad jump move is gone, which isn't really that big of a deal, but it was a nice little part of Pac-Man's moveset that made transitioning between Reveral plates a little more fluid. Also, I had a hard time with Reveraling up some slopes in some very specific instances. Not so many times to be an actual problem, but like, why can't I make it up this slope unless I stand as close as I possibly can to it and fully charge my Reveral? The mazes still have stage hazards and are still awful, especially since now Pac-Man no longer takes damage in mazes. Anything that you normally would have taken damage from in the original game just kills you instantly. I wouldn't have a problem with this if the ghosts were the only things to avoid, but having to navigate around them and the stage hazards is in fact, if you can believe it, not very fun. I would have liked even just a bit of control over the camera. I'm not talking anything major since most levels don't need it. It's just something that would have made parts of levels where you come towards the camera a little more manageable. You know, just being able to pan or rotate the camera slightly, kind of like in Mario 3D World. Honestly, it doesn't even have to be player controlled. Even if they had just programmed the camera to swing around at a slight angle so you could see what was coming next, that would have been perfect. And I know I praised the graphics, and while I do stand by the fact that I think the game looks great, I can't help but feel like it looks just a bit familiar.
Oh, no wonder it tasted so bad!
Pac-Man Museum Plus released in May 2022 to celebrate Pac-Man's 42nd anniversary.
Because you know what they say, your 42nd birthday is only your 83rd most important, so might as well celebrate with Pac-Man Museum Plus.
It's just a simple collection of Pac-Man games throughout the franchise's history. Not a terrible one, but definitely a bit rough around the edges. But what we're going to focus on is the customizable arcade portion of the game. So you can move arcade cabinets and add a bunch of random furniture and decorations into your arcade, and then you can walk around it and walk up to the different cabinets and play the different games. I'm making it sound a lot cooler than it is, but eventually you'll get visitors to your arcade, those being the ghosts and Pac-Man's friends and family. And every single one of these models can be found in Pac-Man World Re-Pac, which just feels so incredibly low effort. And I know it was the other way around. Pac-Man World was in development first, and they reused the models to save time on Museum Plus. But still, the fact that the assets were reused at all just feels gross to me. And it's not just the models. The user interface between both games, the menus and fonts and all that, are basically identical, and they're also not very good. It's just so basic, so generic, it doesn't feel like Pac-Man. You look at the fonts they used in the menus in Pac-Man World 1 and 2, and they've got so much personality to them. And then you look at the remake, and it just feels so lifeless in comparison. Like, look at the main menu of the remake.
I have about 90 questions, and they're all, what the hell is this?
First off, did you hear that? The music fades in. Why does the music fade in? The main menu theme is a bombastic big band style song. It's supposed to grab your attention right out the gate with that. It's not a song you can fade in. And the menu itself isn't good either. There's just nothing to it. You've got Ghost Island in the background, and that's it. Compared to the original, where you had the ghost running around in the background, the logo would occasionally bounce around and shoot fruit everywhere, and you could actually control Pac-Man while selecting a menu option. Like, this is infinitely more interesting. And it's just a black void. The black void is more interesting than the actual background.
And while we're on the topic of the music,
what happened here? The soundtrack is an absolute mess. Some levels have their original tracks with no changes, and some have new remixes, and like, why? If you were gonna redo the tracks, why stop after only a couple? Why not do all of them? But if you're just gonna reuse the original songs for other levels, why remake any at all? And let me be clear, when I say the original tracks, I mean it. They couldn't even be bothered to get the uncompressed versions of these songs. It's literally the exact same tracks as on the PS1, which is absolutely absurd. And as for the remade tracks, they're not that bad, but there's definitely some weird choices they made with them. The most egregious of which being the fact that they went out of their way to actually compress these remixes, or at least make it sound like they did.
Oh, thank God. I was looking forever to find the #1 spot for my list.
My God, I can't even begin to fathom why anyone would think this is even remotely okay. It just sounds so gross. Why would you actively try to make something sound like this? The only reason I can think of would be to keep a consistent sound with the non-remade tracks, which, if that's true, is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Again, why wouldn't you just redo all of the tracks so you don't have this problem and the songs can actually sound good, or why not just remaster all the original tracks?
Okay, let's just dial things back in a little bit. Maybe focus on the positives. Like, let's look at the boss fights.
Yeah, I'm just kidding. The boss fights were probably what I was looking forward to the most with this remake, since I knew there was absolutely no way they were going to keep the original fights as is. The boss fights in the original game were either disgustingly easy or infuriatingly difficult. So what I was looking for with the remake was the easy bosses to be made harder and the harder bosses to be made easier. And wouldn't you know it, the game actually delivered. First thing to know is that each boss is introduced with a little cutscene where Toc-Man shows up, wakes the boss up, and leaves. And I really like this because every time he shows up, he does the same evil laugh as if he's positive this will be the one to do it, even though this is the 5th boss and Pac-Man's already breezed past everything thrown his way. The other nice thing to see is that the bosses get actual health bars now, which is just a nice little addition, even if not desperately needed. And then, yeah, I'd say every boss has been improved over the original game counterparts. HMS Windbag gets a second phase with new attacks. It's not really that much harder, but that's fine, it's the first boss. Anubis Rex has been made way easier. He now sends out easier to dodge attacks, less attacks, and there are now platforms between the rev roll plates to make moving between them easier. King Galaxian has also been made much easier. He's got more telegraphed attacks, so it's easier to tell what's coming. Plus, you can now just hold the fire button to rapid fire shots, which is a godsend. The original fight, you had to mash the button, which was just begging you to develop carpal tunnel. Clown Pre is now played in the first person, which is a neat twist, and the race is fun the whole way through, as in, all of the clowns don't fall off the track in the first 10 seconds. Krome Keeper saw probably the most drastic overhaul out of anyone. The arena you fight him in has been completely redesigned, taking out the pool of acid or whatever in the middle, and instead having the whole fight take place on top of conveyor belts. And instead of needing to grab a Krome power pellet to press a bunch of buttons, you just grab a Krome pellet and attack him directly. He also takes less hits to defeat, thank God, but the fight also takes place over 3 phases, where each phase sees Krome Keeper adding new attachments to give himself new attacks, like missile launchers and big lasers. The only thing I'm not sure about with this fight is the redesigned Krome Keeper himself guy. In the original game, he was just a goofy-looking, cartoony robot, but in the remake, he's got a much more menacing and threatening look, which I'm not really a fan of.
But overall, I was pretty happy with how the bosses turned out. Definitely an improvement over the original game's fights, which were wildly inconsistent. The new fights, well, definitely easier, felt fresh, and way more fun than the original's bullshit. Is what I would say if well, look.
Okay, I'll be honest, this doesn't really have a whole lot of bearing on my thoughts on the remake, but upon revisiting the original game, I found myself having an unusually smooth experience. As in, every single area that gave me trouble on my first couple playthroughs, I completely breezed through. I beat Anubis Rex on like my 5th try, I beat King Galaxian on my 1st try, and every level I had problems with were suddenly uncomfortably easy, and I ended up finishing this playthrough with more lives than I did in the remake.
I don't know how to feel about this.
I'm just gonna chalk it out to this being my 3rd or 4th time playing the game and knowing how to deal with its bullshit. But still, this playthrough went so smoothly, I feel like a bitch forever complaining about this game's difficulty.
Anyways, existential tangents aside, we're now at the end of the game, which means it's finally time to fight Toc-Man, rescue our family, but first, there's a piece of information I've been purposely neglecting to bring up. The truth is, this is a change I legitimately don't know how to wrap my head around. Despite having finished this remake, I have no idea why this was put in the game. Pac-Man grows giant when he eats a power pellet.
I don't get this. I don't understand why is this here? There's no explanation for it. There's no reasoning. It just happens. This was actually a point they brought up in the trailers, and I just figured it was like a new power-up or something. No! It happens every single time you eat a power pellet, and I just legitimately don't understand. It didn't happen in the original Pac-Man world. It doesn't happen in any other Pac-Man game. Why is this here? The thing is, it's not even that helpful. The hitbox for eating ghosts is smaller than this giant model, so you can touch a ghost, think you ate it, and then once you shrink back down to normal size, realize you didn't eat it after all. Why is this in the game? Is it just the Mega Mushroom mentality of, oh, kids like it when you grow comically large in video games? I just don't see the point of making Pac-Man grow huge every single time he eats a power pellet.
Anyways, I bring this up now because it becomes relevant for the final boss.
So the Toc-Man fight also got a pretty sizable overhaul, where the original fight saw Toc-Man using your own moves against you, forcing you to use every part of your moveset. The remake has Toc-Man use the different power pellets to attack. For the first phase, he's just normal and takes damage from butt bouncing on his head. Then in the second phase, he uses the Krome power pellet and can only be damaged if you get a Krome pellet of your own. And then in the third phase, he uses a power pellet to grow massive and...
Wait, was the only reason they changed or added stuff with the power pellets because they wanted to change the final boss? The random Krome enemies and the growing giant after eating a power pellet was only so those concepts didn't come out of nowhere with Toc-Man? That... Well, it still doesn't make any sense, but it at least explains a lot.
Whatever, I'm not going to complain about it, because really this fight is still a lot of fun. Much like with the other bosses, this fight feels fresh. The changes don't make it worse, just different. Except for the fact that when you're low on health, the entire fight has to stop so we can pan over to a family member. They say something generically motivational, then throw you a health wedge to refill your health, where in the original they would just pop up in the corner, never stopping the gameplay. But other than that, I really like this fight. Toc-Man's got a bunch of new moves, like this jetpack charge, shooting his arm cannons, raining cannon fire on you, and the entire phase where he becomes huge. And I'll be honest, I really like this little cutscene that plays at the end of the fight, where Pac-Man starts walking away like he's won, then Toc-Man slaps him into a wall, and then...
Look, I may not understand the whole growing giant thing, but I can at least give it up for that.
And now it's time for the final cutscene, my favorite part of the original game. You just had to do it, didn't you? You just had to piss me off one more time. This will forever go down as one of the most hilariously cold moments in all of video games. Pac-Man was absolutely ruthless, and it came so far out of left field, and it's absolutely perfect. And you just had to go and take it away. At least this means Pac-Man and Orson's team up in the World 3 remake will make a little more sense. If this game didn't call Orson Toc-Man parentheses Ghost. Anyways, finally the credits roll over this little maze section where you collect the letters to spell thank you for playing, all while a vocal theme plays in the background. It's not a bad song, pretty catchy in all honesty, but out of every nuts thing this remake threw at me, this was probably the thing I was least expecting. But anyways, the reason all of this is here is to try and distract you from the fact that they didn't credit the original Pac-Man World's development team at all, because there's always gotta be one more thing. Come on, this game wouldn't exist without the original team. There would be no game to remake without them, so not crediting them is f***ed up. There's no other way to put it.
And that was Pac-Man World Re-Pac. Wait, there's a different ending. What the hell? I take back every big thing I said. This game's a masterpiece.
I'm a bit mixed on how I feel about Pac-Man World Re-Pac. On the one hand, it's pretty much exactly what I wanted from a remake of Pac-Man World. It looks a lot better, it for the most part controls a lot better, and it made every obscenely difficult part from the original game not obscenely difficult and actually fun. But then on the other hand, there's just so many smaller issues that end up adding up to give this game a somewhat lifeless feel to it. The worst cutscenes, the lack of voice acting, the controls they made worse, the crummy logo, the soulless UI, and everything about the soundtrack. On their own, none of these seem that problematic, and they don't really seem like they would be that hard or take that much time to fix. so it just begs to ask why it was like this in the first place.
All in all, I do think this is still a good game, a fun game. If you're looking for a modern, more accessible way to play Pac-Man World, then this is gonna give it to you. It's still the same fantastic adaptation of a maze-based arcade game into a 3D platformer that it was on the PlayStation. It may even be the best way to play the game. I just know it could have been better.
And should it not have been? With all the rough edges and cut corners, it kind of feels like the dev team had to beg the higher-ups at Bandai Namco to let them make this game because of how badly the fans wanted it, and eventually the higher-ups went fine and gave the team like $26 in 3 weeks to throw this together. But like, why? This is Pac-Man, one of the most recognizable characters in all of video games, all of entertainment. Why treat him like anything else? Why treat him like he's a relic of a bygone era? Pac-Man barely even feels like a video game character anymore, and instead just feels like a corporate entity. We're Mickey Mouse and Super Mario. But why reduce him to that? People love Pac-Man, they want to see him more. He's got such a unique gameplay design that can be translated into so many different types of fun experiences. And he rarely gets anything outside of a re-release of the original game or another basic-looking maze game barfed onto mobile or whatever every few years.
It's a little disheartening to see something I had so much love for as a kid devolve into a mangled husk that's kept alive for no other reason than it's Pac-Man. You can't kill Pac-Man, which is why this remake is so great to see and why I desperately want it to do well. It gives me even just a little bit of hope that we might see Pac-Man come back. Now, do I think we'll see a Pac-Man World 2 remake? I'm honestly not sure. I really think the possibility of a World 2 remake is solely dependent on how well this game does. And hey, if it does well enough, then maybe a World 2 remake will get a little more time, money, and effort put into it. Because, honestly, if a World 2 remake has the same kind of cut corners as this did, then I don't even think I want to see a World 2 remake. But that's just my nostalgia talking. Obviously, I would love to see a World 2 remake in any capacity. Even if it is a little rough around the edges and has a couple minor issues, if this remake's anything to go off of, then the core gameplay will still be intact and we'll have a fantastic way to play a classic game on modern consoles. As for the third game, honestly, I still stand by the idea that we'll never see it again. That game is so Pac-Man World 3 that even if a World 2 remake was the best-selling game on the f***ing planet, they still wouldn't even consider bringing World 3 back. Would I like to see the game get a second chance? Absolutely. Do I think it's going to? Hell no. But for the time being, this is what we've got. And what we've got is pretty good. For all the issues it has, none of them take away from the fact that this is still Pac-Man World. You play this game, you're getting the Pac-Man World experience. But of course, after all of that, I still haven't brought up the biggest, most obvious change. I redecorated my room. Look, I painted my walls. I live in this corner now. I can't believe nobody noticed.